you've heard some emotional pleas from individuals, also concerns about the loss of jobs. I feel the role of Life Saving Society here is to bring you some facts and evidence-based data and research, and also precedents of other similar type situations to help you in your budget deliberations. So just a brief number of points here. The first one is we respect the fact that these are very difficult decisions for you, and it's a tough process, and we respect that. I wanted to point out, though, the administrative report from the Director of Finance of Vancouver City Council on page 3 notes that public safety is listed as one of Council's priorities. I don't need to remind you of that. Further on in the Mustel Group report, there are a number of things identified by the public in the survey that they did that they would be willing to forego, and lifeguard services is not even close to being on that list. On page 34 of the same report, respondents were assured, and this is a quote from the report, respondents were assured that the city would maintain all appropriate health and safety standards, and were also told that any changes made would be planned to minimize the impact on the public. And then further on page 35, reducing public safety services while still maintaining minimum standards of safety was ranked number 11 and as least supported in that report. Flip side goes into some points that I think are very important from the Life Saving Society point of view. It's been mentioned already, the majority of lifeguards' job is prevention. The fact that a drowning has not occurred on lifeguard supervised Vancouver beaches since my understanding is 1975 is due to their extensive training and their preventive activities. And although it's very difficult to quantify that, the high value of prevention will become very obvious when an incident does occur. Second point, lifeguards perform a variety of duties, preventative but otherwise, that have little to do with water safety, including discourage alcohol consumption, rowdy behavior, bylaw infringement, and it would be anticipated that without lifeguards on the beaches that either these would go unaddressed or increased police presence would be required. Similarly with first aid incidents. A lot of prevention there, a lot of first aid incidents are taken care of. 90 to 115 major first aid incidents and over 4,000 minor first aid situations each year on Vancouver beaches. So again, without lifeguards there, it would be anticipated that increased fire department ambulance services would be required without the lifeguards doing the excellent job that they do on beaches. A precedent for you, in the mid-90s at City of Winnipeg, in fact province of Manitoba, the Lake Winnipeg lifeguards were removed as a budget-cutting measure. And in fact, in that situation, the following summer, they had 7 drownings on Lake Winnipeg alone. There was a high-profile coroner's inquest, and shortly after that, they reinstated lifeguard patrols. So I caution you on the decision based on that precedent. Another major factor that's been mentioned briefly is the fact that the City of Vancouver welcomes thousands of new Canadians each year. The Life Saving Society had Ipsos Reid do some research in 2010 that showed that those new Canadians are probably 4 times more likely to not be able to swim. And in fact, of course, that's going to increase their chance of being in a drowning situation or a near drowning situation. A couple of the other facts have been mentioned. Just a statistic, the Life Saving Society provides drowning and near drowning statistics. Less than 1% of drownings in Canada occur in lifeguard supervised areas, indicating that removing lifeguards from beaches would be an ill-advised use. And finally, just to strongly encourage you to reconsider providing your citizens with the level of protection they expect and deserve at your Vancouver beaches. Thank you.
I know, he knows. I'm going to be honest with you, man.
I'll try and stay, I'll try and
There's a door that you'll drop through.
Yeah, I know. First of all, Commissioner Cooper, you're sitting in a lucky seat. Worked well for me for 3 years. Anyway, first of all, it's good to see all of you. And I wanted to start off by saying no one asked me to come down here to speak tonight. I'm here as a former two-term commissioner, past chair, past vice chair. I've been the liaison to the Jericho Sailing Center and Trout Lake, two of the areas that you're considering reducing lifeguards. But I'm really here as a resident. And I have to say a few things, since leaving the board, a few things will get me out of my cozy home to come down here on a Monday night. But you know what, this is one of them, because quite frankly, I think we're talking about the independence of the park board. And I'm weaving that into this story because quite honestly, I cannot believe that this item is coming before the board. I mean, now I know you've had a briefing on this. I mean, that's how these things go. And you had an opportunity at that briefing to toss this out and say, no, we're not going there. But yet, here we are here today. And I think that I certainly was not part of the board when we ever had a budget reduction idea that threatens public safety. And this one does. Quite honestly, I've looked at the reductions that have been suggested, and to be honest, to be frank, I agree with most of them. As tough as they are, I know you've got to make tough decisions. And I can live with some of those decisions, but the decision that you're looking at to reduce the lifeguards at these beaches is just, there's only one word for it, it's ludicrous. I can recall an incident in 2009. Thankfully, the individual did not have a loaded gun. It was a starter pistol, but it occurred at one of the boats just off of Jericho Beach. And if it wasn't for a lifeguard on the scene at that time to get people out of the water, who knows what would have happened. Now I'm saying it was a false situation. It was a mentally ill individual that was on one of the boats, but he was out there waving a gun around. Now, what if that had been real? Who would have been there to provide some direction to get people out of the water? The lifeguard did that. You know, your job is to advocate, to preserve and protect the park board services that the residents of Vancouver enjoy. Commissioner Barnes, I know you've been quoted as saying that White Rock does not have any lifeguards. They do. There is lifeguard service July and August out at Crescent Beach. And I hazard to guess that if White Rock had a independently voted elected park board, they would probably have more lifeguards in place. I mean, the beauty of it being in Vancouver is we do have an elected park board, and you're here to represent the views and the perspectives of the residents sitting behind me and those that can't make it out to these meetings. And that's your job. And quite frankly, it's gut check time. I mean, you're about to make a decision that is going to have life-threatening consequences. And I think you've really got to weigh upon that because it's a very, very serious decision. Quite honestly, I think you need to go back to council, the mayor's office, the city manager's office, who's ever driving this and saying, you've got to find more initiatives. You've got to push back and say, no, I'm not going to take a $300,000 cut so we can put the residents of Vancouver at risk. And if you want to start somewhere, you could go to the mayor's office and ask him why he's doubled the staff over the last 5 years. And maybe he could look at efficiencies within his own office. What I'm trying to tell you here, and I'm not being political, I'm saying there are ways within this city in which you can go back and ask for efficiencies. That's your job. Your job is to push back, and your job is to drive council, to drive the mayor, to say we want more efficiencies and we're not going to take them out of the park board, and we're not going to put the residents of Vancouver and the tourists that come to the city at risk. So that's really all I have to say.
All right, any questions?
I have a question for former Commissioner Robertson. In your experience, when you were on the board, when you were the chair, did this ever come before you? And what was your direction to staff when it came before you?
You're asking me what was my direction when we
Was there anything to do with lifeguards that came to you at any one point?
I believe during my last term on the board, there was some discussion at about a year ago or around this this time where we did look at lifeguards, and I think the consensus around the table at that time was, we're not gonna go there. That's something we just didn't want to do. I don't want to paraphrase the other commissioners that were there, but my best recollection is that we said, no, we weren't going to go there.
Commissioner Diginova.
Also a question for former Commissioner Robertson. Drawing on your experience as chair and as a commissioner, would you say that if we did make cuts that are recommended here tonight, that policing costs would go up? We haven't heard from staff regarding policing, as police have not gotten back to them, but the beach patrol, it's my understanding from hearing all of the people here tonight and through my own research, that lifeguards do more than water rescue. They're more like the ambassadors for our beaches. And as you just mentioned, with the starter pistol, would you anticipate that we would have to have more police officers patrolling our beaches then?
There's no question in my mind that there are going to be more incidents that are going to require a 911 response. I mean, one of the other issues that we haven't had really touched upon is what's going to happen to those beaches that are not patrolled or guarded. Heaven forbid, you're going to see a huge escalation in emails and calls you're going to get about dogs off leash, because you know what's going to happen is in those areas, I think residents are going to say, oh, okay, I'll take my dog down there. So, warn you right now, you're going to see other things happen in those areas. And there's no question that you are going to see, I put money on. I put my former commissioner's stipend on it, that you're going to see better. You're going to see an increase in the frequency of 911 calls, because yes, the lifeguards, we know that the lifeguards do deal with a range of incidents beyond just providing life-saving services in the water. They, as has been mentioned, they're doing many other things.
Also for Ian, drawing on your past experience also, do you think that we also might be looking at other problems that we haven't considered? For instance, concessions on these beaches, and because people won't be visiting them as frequently, if they aren't lifeguarded, that we would see a decline in revenue. So there's all sorts of other issues. That's what you're saying, but could you elaborate a little bit more on some of the other issues?
No, I don't. I can't, because I can't say for sure. I have no idea of knowing that. I still think that you still want to get the people coming to the beaches, and what you're going to see is that people are going to be out there. I mean, I can just tell you, and I'll just keep this really short. I mean, as a parent, Spanish Banks West is a particular concern, because you've got those long, that long flat beach, and all of a sudden it drops off. And that tide can come whipping in very, very quickly, and you can find kids, because I've seen it, that are kind of trapped out there, and all of a sudden the water's coming in and they have no way of getting back. And my concern is that, what's going to happen to that? And I think Mr. Carter brought up a really good point, is you are going to see increased frequency down in Jericho. There's no question about it, with what's been happening with realignment of the shore. So people are going to swim it, and I just think we shouldn't even be talking about it right now, to be honest.
Right. Kevin? Any more questions for these allegations? Thank you so much. Start by Community Center, Ian Robertson, Park and Prime.
I said that to him. I'm like, it's going to look like we're in collusion. Completely separate.
I know.
God love Ian for advocating for me still. I love him. Isn't he great? He is. And Mary Sutherland, President of Kensington Community Center Association.
Thank you both for coming out tonight. We've got 5 minutes, you both know. And